Welcome back. This is Sandy with Sandy's Organized Chaos. Sometimes a minimalistic approach to our walking art can really yield just as fabulous of a design as any other tumbler out there. So today we're going to be kind of doing this very minimalistic look with its straight lines, very easy color palette, and of course a little leopard in between. So let's wake up, prep those tumblers, and slay all day. Let's do this. So today I'm going to use a 30-ounce regular curved tumbler for my design. I went ahead and spray painted it the night before. I like to spray paint my tumblers the night before. It just makes it easier, especially if you're using tape on the tumbler. It won't peel that paint back. I just spray painted it this white sand, which is a beautiful off-white color. And after I have that all situated, the first thing I'm going to do is figure out where I want my leopard print to be, because we're going to make a template for that across the middle here. So since this is a 30 ounce, I wanted to go about 4 inches up because I knew I wanted my leopard stripe to be about 2 inches, seeing as I'm working on such a big tumbler. Just make sure that you kind of go down if you need to when you're working on smaller sizes or bigger sizes. So you just want to kind of go from there and gauge how big you want your stripes to be. I just did the first 2 inches right off my measuring tape there. As you can see, I made little pencil marks. Now I'm going to find something nice and sturdy that I can take my pencil and just make a straight line completely around my tumbler so that way I can put my tape down to continue on with what I need to do next. And once I have my lines on, I'm going to go ahead and just take some simple painter's tape. You just want to block off that middle area before we move on to this next step. Now you can spray paint the middle if you'd like, if you already have a brown spray paint, but I'm just going to use my Pantheon paints from Christy Taylor Creations, which I'll put her shop down in the description box below, so that way you can shop her amazing paints. I'm just going to apply my paints with a fluffy makeup brush that I purchased from the Dollar Tree. So it's very simple. You just want a nice fluffy brush when you're painting these on. Now these dry extremely quick, so I did 2 coats of these, and then after that is dry, I'll go ahead and remove that tape, and then we'll keep on going. Now, after I removed my tape, I did notice that some of that paint did kind of seep up underneath, but that's okay. I'm just going to come through with some rubbing alcohol and just really clean up my lines so that way none of those little edges are showing once we go to apply our glitter. I'm going to go ahead and put my tumbler back on its wand because now we get to do the fun stuff. We get to apply our glitter. I'm going to use Mod Podge today to apply the glitter. I know it's not something I typically do, but when I do leopard spots, I like to work on raw glitter that has been on the tumbler with Mod Podge. It just works best for me. So you can do your epoxy method if you'd like to, but I'm just going to move forward with how I typically do mine. And when I'm also using Mod Podge to do a whole entire tumbler like this, it kind of dries really quick. So I actually like to moisten my brush before I use my Mod Podge, and it just helps keep the Mod Podge nice and wet before I apply my glitter. Now the glitter I'm going to be using today is Agenda, and we're just going to coat the entire thing with that. It is a beautiful kind of cheek glitter. It has a very golden undertone, so I thought it went really well with what we're doing today. Now I'm going to go ahead and let that fully dry. I just set off to the side and let it dry for about an hour. I just like it nice and dry before we move on to adding our leopard spots, so none of those other little glitters that we're going to be using kind of get stuck down in there. Now before I do my leopard spots, I'm going to completely sweep my tumbler, and I'm going to make sure I get off any of those little extra glitters that just didn't get stuck down. This also helps out the process with your leopard spots, so that way your brush doesn't get all gunked up with any little pieces of glitter along the way. I'm going to block off the center again, so that way when we go to do the leopard spots, it doesn't kind of get back up into the white glitter that's at the top and the bottom. Now this painter's tape doesn't really stick to the glitter, but it does stick to itself. So you just want a long enough piece of tape to be able to wrap completely around onto itself, and make sure you tighten it down really good, and that will help us out with blocking the top and the bottom. Now that everything's all prepped, we're going to go ahead and keep moving on here. Now I'm going to be using suede, and I'll also be using black diamond, and those are both from my glitter shop, socglitters.com. But you can obviously use any type of brown glitter or black glitter you already have on hand. Now, I like my leopard spots kind of big and kind of exaggerated. So I like to use this 2-inch chip brush. It's my favorite brush. I've used it for everything from my wood grains to my leopard spots. That's what I use this brush for. So I'm going to take my Mod Podge, I'm going to load up my brush really good, and I'm just going to make these spots that kind of overlap onto the tape. That's exactly why we needed the tape, because I like to make it look like it's dipping in and out of those colors up above and below it. Now, if you notice, I'm not making these spots perfect. You want it to look almost like it's fur in between other fur. That's why you just kind of want to do a dabbing motion when you're applying it. And that's why I like my nice crazy brush for this texture. Now I'm going to go ahead and apply my suede. I'm going to go ahead and knock any extra glitters off that I can. And then we're going to go ahead and move on to the black portion around the outsides of our spots. Now I'm not letting these spots dry. Like I said, I'm moving right on to the black portion. So now here I'm going to use black paint, or you can use black acrylic paint to achieve this look as well. I think it just really helps darken up our spots around the outside, or finish up our spots around the outside. So I'm going to go ahead, and I just have a nice flat or round brush that I'm going to be using. I'm going to load up my brush really good because I kind of like a lot of that paint on my brush to really kind of soak in the glitters that I'm using. So I'm going to go ahead and just very abstractly dab the black around the outside. As you can see, I'm just kind of hugging up against the spot and just kind of letting the spot tell me where it would like the black. Now I'm going to go ahead and take my black diamond, which is kind of a chunky glitter, which is why I add a little bit more black paint than I should. It really helps out those chunky glitters to lay flat down into the paint. And as I go, I just try to make sure that I don't keep the outer rings all in the same direction. I kind of want them just a little bit different on each spot, because if you look at a leopard or a jaguar, because this is almost like if a jaguar and a leopard got together, I guess. If you look at their rings on their fur, it's not perfect. There's little inconsistencies where they're turned one way and turned the other. So you just want to follow along with that. Maybe get a photo for some inspiration and just go from there. It is so simple, and I know you guys got this. Now, once I have my black outer ring all done, I like to come through and kind of add just these little half circles here and there in between. Again, you don't have to do this if you don't want to. This is just something I like to do. It's kind of a visual thing for me. I just like the way it looks. But if you want to just kind of keep it a little bit more natural, you don't have to do this part. But I'm just going to add they're almost like little V's. Some of them kind of look like hearts too, but you just want to do these little spots in between, do the same thing, add your little bit of black diamond, and your leopard spots are done. Now I'm going to go ahead and tap off as much as I can, but I'm not too worried about it right now because I'll show you guys in a minute how you just sweep it right off once it's fully dry. But I'm going to go ahead and remove my tape. I'm going to set this off to the side and let it dry completely. You just want to make sure it is nice and dry before we add our epoxy, because you don't want any wet paint under your epoxy. That would be no good. It could kind of fog up your epoxy if it's not fully cured. So I'm going to set that off to the side, and then we'll come through and brush off any extra of those little glitters that might be in between. All right, now I let that tumbler sit off to the side, and you see I have another chip brush that I just used to sweep all my glitters away. So I'm just going to go completely around the center, sweep any extra glitters off, which will also help us when we go to apply our epoxy. So that way it keeps those glitters from going up into the white or down into the white on the top and bottom. Now the next thing we're going to do is extremely important. This is really going to keep those white glitters as pure as possible. We're going to take it outside and we're going to spray it really, really good with our 2x Ultra Sealer Hair. Now I do this 2 or 3 times. I come inside, I check with my glove, make sure nothing is going to move around or shift on my tumbler, because there's nothing worse than doing all this hard work and those glitters shifting around. So I'm just kind of showing you guys, I do up and down motions. I'm not spraying in my house. I'm just showing you the movements that I'm doing. I spray up and down, then I make sure that I just go completely around the center one good time, and there we go. Nice and stuck down to our tumbler. Now, it is inevitable, even though I brushed it and sprayed it as best as I could, because we use chunky glitters around the outer rings there are going to be some little spots that kind of go up into your white, but that's okay. You just pull them out with your finger or whatever you need to, but it's definitely way better than all the little fine glitters going up in between. And after I have this completely loaded up with my epoxy and I pull out any little black glitters that may have gotten into the white, I'm going to go ahead and place it on my turner. I'm going to hit it up really good with my torch to get any of those little micro bubbles out, and I'm going to let that cure overnight. You want to give it a good sanding, and all that's left to do is add our finishing decals. So the decals that I'm using today, I just made up some pinstripes right in my Cricut design space. I'm using this textured, I think it's like a gold or a bronze color vinyl, and I made the width of my pinstripes 0.056, and I just made them 12 inches long because at the top of those regular curves, it needs a little bit more to reach all the way around. And I just made my decal kind of a basic size. I made it about 2 inches high by a little over 3 inches wide, which is pretty typical for a regular curved tumbler. So I'm going to go ahead and apply my Thankful decal at the top here. I ended up using my painter's tape to kind of get it onto my cup because sometimes those textured metallics are just a little fussy and need a little bit more of a sticky backing. So I just use my painter's tape, get that applied, and then we're going to move on to our pinstriping. Now for the pinstriping, I just followed the line that I made right at the top, and I'm going to do the same thing for the bottom. You just want to line it up really good, and this is a good opportunity to kind of hide any little mistakes you might have made in your paint there. This will kind of help that out too. Okay, so now that those are applied, we're going to go ahead and move on to the pinstripes around the bottom. Now, I know that applying pinstripes, especially when there's nothing there to kind of guide you, is kind of nerve-wracking, but it's going to be okay. And again, you absolutely got this. So if you remember, we measured 4 inches up from the bottom, so we did a 2-inch leopard stripe, and now we're going to do a 2-inch stripe worth of our pinstriping. So I'm just going to go in between every 1/2 inch, and I'm going to make 3 dots down my tumbler. So essentially I did 1/2 inch, 1 inch, and then 1.5 inches. And the marker that I'm using is just a basic dry erase marker, which you can get at the dollar store as well. And just like we did when we went to go make the pinstripe or the stripe around the center for the leopard, I'm going to get my hand propped up onto something where I can steadily twist my tumbler around to connect those dots together so that way we have a nice line that we can follow completely around. So I just hold my hand steady and then I twist my tumbler around. Now, the hardest part about this is trying to find a perfectly flat spot on my table because my table is pretty worn out. So you just want a nice flat surface to be able to twist your tumbler and to connect those dots. And this is what it should look like once you are done. I'm going to go ahead and hold that up to the camera here. See? Now you have some perfectly straight lines to be able to guide your pinstriping around. Now you can go completely over the pinstriping you did, or you can go a little bit above it or a little bit below it. It's completely up to you on how you want to do it. I went just slightly above mine, and then I'm just going to do like we did with the leopard stripes. I'm going to keep wrapping that around until it is all the way completed. And a great thing about this textured metallic vinyl is once you kind of cut off the excess on the other side, you can't even tell where it was at. That's pretty nice. I really like that. Now, once I am done applying my pinstripes here, I'm just going to take some rubbing alcohol and I'm going to wipe away my marks that I had made. And once I am done doing that, I will apply my 2 last finishing coats of epoxy, and she is good to go. Whether you take this design and duplicate it as is, or you take it and let it inspire you to create something that is completely your own, I hope that you guys had a lot of fun watching this tutorial today. If you're new to my channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and I will see you guys next time.